Good afternoon, and thank you for organizing the first ever online SimSim conference. My name is Panagiotis Poulopoulos, and I'm a research associate at the Deutsches Museum in Munich. My paper today is titled Serial Numbers as Information Source and Tool for Building Virtual Instrument Collections. And in this paper, I will describe the importance of serial numbers for understanding objects and also how they can be used to build virtual collections. So from the 19th century, serial numbers have become an indispensable feature of mass-produced consumer goods, including musical instruments. From an organological perspective, these numbers are quite useful for identification, attribution, dating, and authentication purposes. But they're also important from a historical perspective because they can provide new information on the manufacture and marketing of popular artifacts, including, for example, qualitative and quantitative information. From a research perspective, these numbers are also quite important because they can help to unify objects of the same manufacturer and model that may be scattered around in different collections around the world. And from a museological or didactic perspective, serial numbers are helpful, especially in the building of virtual artifact collections. And I would like to illustrate this with a case study regarding VRR Grecian double action harps. So these instruments were introduced in 1811 in London by Sébastien Echard, and these were the first fully functional and commercially built double action harps. And their manufacturer relied on early industrial practices. For example, the instruments were made in batches using standardized interchangeable parts, and they were systematically numbered and registered in ledgers. The so-called Grecian model, because of its neoclassical decoration, was produced for about 25 years, from 1811 to 1836. About 3,500 of these harps were produced in total, with about 100 to 150 harps being built per year in London. And of all these instruments, we know that roughly about 300 survive in private and public collections around the world, indicating a survival rate of about 8.5%. And how do we know this? We know this because these instruments were numbered. As I said, there are used a numbering system for these harps, and it is quite interesting to mention how these numbers can be interpreted. So most of these harps are numbered with an official or primary number, which is engraved on the brass plates housing the mechanism of the harp, which you can see on the left photograph. But there are also several secondary numbers and initials stamped on wooden or on metal parts, which point out perhaps some sort of subcontracting or internal communication between different workshops at the RR company. And the interesting thing is that both numbers, both the official or primary and the secondary numbers, can be found usually on a wooden block placed on the neck to capital join. So this is a quite interesting feature, and it allows the understanding of these numbers. And these numbers are also registered in VRR ledgers. And for example, on these harps, we have information from VRR London harp ledgers, which survive at the RCM. At this point, I would like to thank again the team from the Royal College of Music for their help that they provided during my research in answering my requests and providing information about the ledgers. And these ledgers are quite useful tool because they provide lots of details about these instruments. about the manufacture and sale. One example here regards the Echard harp number 3916. So, for example, from the ledgers, we know that it was built in 1826. It was sold 1 year later in 1827. Several years later, it came back for a repair in 1861. It was returned again to the company in 1883, and it was resold in 1884. So we can see how the ledgers can help us reconstruct the object biography and also add some contextualization on the use and repair and disposal of these instruments. And I started investigating the serial numbers on Echard harps during my postdoc project on early pedal harps, which was funded by the Volkswagen Foundation between 2016 and 2020. And my aim was to build a virtual collection that could be used by different professionals, from scholars to curators, conservators, or collectors, but also for the wider public. And it was it was designed as an open access initiative because it will be accessible through the online portal Deutsches Museum Digital. And although it is designed as a one-page application, it can offer page speed, detectability, and indexing. And one important feature of the collection is that each of the numerous harps has an individual URL permalink, enhancing its searchability in search engines. Now, a few words about the structure and the content of the virtual collection. In the beginning, there is an introduction about the Echard Grecian harps and their features. Then there are some guidelines on how to read and use the data in the virtual collection, and also information on the types of inscriptions found on Echard harps. All the content in the collection is provided in English to make it more accessible to an international audience. All harps are listed by their serial numbers as reported in the ledgers, which more or less corresponds to the chronological order of their manufacture. And you can see here one example of one page from the ledgers where the instruments are listed. And each entry consists of 16 fields, including, for example, details of manufacture and sale as recorded in the ledgers, basic object data such as the owner, the location, inventory number, plus photographs of the instruments. And the final section includes the sources of information, bibliographical references, remarks, and also a link to the object when available. And although this virtual collection is still at an early stage and it's a work in progress, I'm showing here how it will probably look like. So you can, for example, here I'm showing the entry for the Echard harp 2631, which is housed at the Deutsches Museum. You can see on the left side, the harps are listed according to their serial numbers, and one can look for a particular serial number, and then all the different data are provided, plus the photographs of these instruments. And as I said, this is work in progress, but there are also already some conclusions and some experience gathered from the project. So I will focus on the main challenges and potentials. So the first important fact is that the majority of these Echard Grecian harps are in private hands, which means that in many cases the serial numbers, the data, or the images are quite difficult to find or to confirm. On the other hand, what is achieved so far is that most harps in public collections, which usually have permanent details, are already included in the virtual collection. So it's a good first step, I think. Another interesting point is that in order to build this collection, it was necessary to study and interpret the numbering system used by Echard to avoid errors, because, for example, in some cases, two harps were given the same number, or objects were renumbered after some years. But the good thing is that the concept of a virtual collection, it could be adapted to other instruments or even other museums objects bearing serial numbers. So I think, again, it's a good experience having this virtual collection. Another fact is that to build this collection, it is necessary to work in close cooperation with IT specialists to develop and determine the layout, the parameters, and the features. So this requires time and resources. On the other hand, this kind of collection has the advantage of being easy to edit and update content according to new research findings, compared, for example, to a printed checklist of instruments. And finally, there may be issues regarding the long-term management, the maintenance, and the compatibility of digital content, as in other projects. But I think the main advantage is that the data can be accessible to a wide audience, and their comparison can be also useful for research purposes, but also for conservation or exhibition projects. And as a last word, I would like to say that this project started and was further developed during the COVID lockdown. So we tried to use all different means of communication and exchange within the museum and with all the colleagues. So I think this is a quite hopeful message also for our future museum work. And with these words, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your remarks. Thank you.